have occupational therapy, speech therapy, mental health, counseling, play therapy, and social skills groups. We're located in Gowanus Park Slope. And I guess when I think about our practice and think about the things that we are most passionate about, it's really just kind of looking at kids from all of our lenses and from different perspectives. And that's sort of how this webinar grew was, how we each like to bring our own perspective from our own disciplines and how we think about our kids. So I wanted to introduce Anna is our occupational therapist. Hi, Anna. Amy Weber is our licensed clinical social worker. Hi, Amy. I'm Jen. I am the speech language pathologist. You should have gotten a handout or emailed to you, so feel free to reference that at any time. And then the roadmap for today will really be all of us are going to do a little bit like a quick overview of executive functioning and how we address it from our perspectives, how we think about it. And then we're going to leave it up to you guys and really just answer your questions. And we hope that'll be the bulk of our time together today. So yeah, Anna, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. So we decided to talk about executive functioning because it really is the root of what affects so many functional activities, social relationships, academic performance, and it also happens to be an area that Amy works on with her clients, Jen works on with hers, and I work on in OT with my clients. So what is executive functioning? Executive functioning is a set of skills in the frontal lobe of the brain, and it allows us to plan ahead, organize, and regulate ourselves in order to meet our goals and function in daily life. There are many different areas of executive functioning, and I'll delve into a few, then Jen will take over, and then Amy. And it's also important to note that these skills actually start to emerge in preschool and they continue to develop into adulthood. It's also worth mentioning that children with ADHD and ASD often struggle with executive functioning. So executive dysfunction, when executive functioning isn't working so smoothly, this can look like physical or verbal impulsivity, trouble following multi-step instructions or routines, difficulty managing emotions or self-regulating. I know this is a term we hear about a lot, self-regulation. Kids can be easily distracted, frequently late, disorganized. They might have difficulty with handwriting, which I'll get into in a little bit. Transitioning might be really difficult. Not being flexible with changes in routine, and trouble initiating tasks. So I'm going to talk about a few different areas of executive functioning, the first one being working memory. This is something that we use without even being aware when we're doing complex tasks such as cooking. And working memory is when we use information that we already have in our memory to complete a task. So what I do when I'm working with a child with who struggles with working memory is I always break down complex tasks into smaller steps with visuals. So I like to work on cooking because this is an area that targets working memory and executive functioning, because my clients have to recall a list of ingredients, then find them around the kitchen or my office. They start working on a step and then they have to remember, oh, I have to go back and do this component. And I just wanted to share my screen and show you this really great resource. And I put it on my handout. But if you want to ever practice cooking at home with your kids, if it is, an age-appropriate activity. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So this is accessiblechef.com, and they really break it down in a simple way. They add visuals, They make it really clear so that your kids can be independent, and you can sort of better understand where the breakdown might be happening. Okay. I just wanted to share that with you. And I use that a lot in my sessions. Another thing you can practice with your child to work on working memory is teaching your child their basic information, and emergency contact information, birthday, address. And there's a few strategies you can use, and I mentioned this in the handout. The first is the chunking strategy. So start with teaching them 3 digits, and then see if you can add 4 and 5 and see if they can recall. Another strategy, which I use a lot, is the use of song. So teaching your phone number or address to the tune of maybe their favorite TV show theme song or something like that. That can be really helpful. Also, visual working memory is part of working memory. So allowing us to hold an image in our mind after it goes away. And you can target this through memory games, puzzles, spot the difference worksheets. And if your child has trouble with this, you might see letter reversals. So their inability to hold on to that picture of what a J looks like, forgetting that it hooks to the left, so they make it hook to the right. Okay, so that's working memory. The next thing I wanted to discuss is organization, developing systems to keep track of materials. Using a visual schedule, it can be really helpful. Creating a consistent routine, making sure that your child uses checklists to keep track of homework, what to bring home. Using a cubby system, making sure they put things in the same place every day. Color coding subjects. And maybe there's like a cubby area or a closet that your child uses every day. You could add pictures if your child needs more support, to remind them where to put their coat and their backpack, etc. So to really start to create habits. The next part of executive functioning I wanted to discuss is planning. So the ability to create steps to achieve a goal. You can encourage your child, if this is age appropriate and where they're at cognitively, encourage them to pack their backpack. So try to let your child pack their backpack first on their own, see where the breakdown occurs. Maybe they need to be reminded to look at their class schedule. Maybe they need to make a list of items. And then after a while, see if you can remove the list and see if they can recall and be more independent. You can challenge them to pack a suitcase for a trip. And work on problem solving. So, Joe, what do you do before bed? Oh, you brush your teeth and wash your face. Do you think you're going to be doing that on vacation? Okay, so what do you need to do? What do you need to pack to be doing that in Florida? If your child struggles with this planning component of executive functioning, it affects handwriting in that your child might struggle with planning where to start their letters relative to the line, spacing, capitalization, making sure certain letters dive below the line. So I like to use highlighted paper to show where lowercase letters should be. And I like to recommend a graph paper to help with spacing. I just wanted to show what highlighted paper looks like if your child's letters are floating around. It's a really simple strategy you can use. It looks like this, and it really helps a lot of kids who struggle with this component. What else? Oh, motor planning is also part of executive functioning. So I like to, in our gym, play the floor is lava game. So can the child figure out how to get across the gym without touching the floor? Can they, slow down when walking on a balance beam versus speed up when, running and jumping with the trapeze? Climbing a rock wall also works on motor planning. You can make obstacle courses at home to see if your child can motor plan without verbal directions or a visual demonstration. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about following directions and sequencing, the ability to follow steps to complete a task. Again, cooking is something that works on this skill. Use visuals to help with following directions. Allow your child to problem solve. So, okay, we've added everything. The directions say mix. What should we use? Encourage your child to pack their own lunch. That's a good one to try at home. And if your child has trouble with sequencing, you might see trouble with tying shoelaces. So this is something I work on in OT frequently. So a few tricks. I use pipe cleaners instead of laces to get rid of the physical demand so they can focus more on the steps. I also use song and 2 different colored laces so they can see where each lace moves relative to the other. Sequencing also with obstacle courses, can they recall each step independently? Setting the table is also a good sequencing activity you can try at home. First, I'd like to practice with placemat with outlines of each item, and then I take it away and see if they can remember. Folding laundry is another great functional activity. Start with step 1. Okay, the shirt goes face down. You try. Can they imitate this? Then add the second component, the second step. Morning routine. If your child can't complete a morning routine, make a checklist with words and visuals so they can be more independent. And then after a while, can you take this away? Can they remember the components independently? And then again, with trouble with sequencing, you might see trouble with handwriting, having a hard time remembering the sequence of the pieces of the letters. So I use repetition with verbal cues, big line down, little line across for L. Some strategies you can use at home if you're allowing your child to have some iPad time. Writing Wizard is a really great app. I put that in the handout. And allowing your child to have multi-sensory opportunities to practice writing, like in shaving cream or pudding, that can be really fun and help with sustained attention and memory. So that is my my spiel on the 4 that I mentioned. I know I just threw a lot of information at you, but hopefully you understand a bit more of why maybe your child might be struggling in these areas, what you can practice with at home. And a lot of people don't really know what OT is. So hopefully now you understand a bit more about what I do in my sessions. Does anyone have any questions, or are we saving them till the end? Oh, Jen, you're muted.
I think we'll save all the questions for the end, so that way we can have, we can talk at length.
Okay, great. And
Okay.
Jen, you want to go ahead now?
Sure. Thank you so much. So what I would like to focus on really is executive functioning and how it impacts language. Interestingly, a lot of what Anna said actually relates to language in terms of your ability to sequence information, and we use a lot of the same techniques, and a lot of the same, I should say, activities, like something like cooking or using a visual schedule to get kids to help with, to talk about the things that they're doing in a sequence. But also executive functioning and how it kind of integrates with language also has a lot of impacts academics, and that's really the bulk of what I do here, is how to help kids who have executive functioning weaknesses also succeed academically. So when thinking about language and executive functioning, there are real actually, let me share my handout with you. That might be make it a little bit easier to kind of visualize. There are 3 main areas that are sort of impacted by executive functions that I want to talk about. One is communicating your ideas verbally, reading, and writing. And I would say writing is the #1 area at school that is impacted by weaknesses in executive functioning, because it requires so many both language processes and executive functions. But more specifically, and they all sort of integrate together. None of this happens in a vacuum or a bubble. but it does help to kind of sometimes think about them individually. So one is sustained attention, kind of your ability to focus on a task for a long period of time. And Anna mentioned that as well. When we think about it in speaking, are you paying attention? Are you focused on your communication partner? Are you having a conversation and, listening to what they say? And some of our kids with ADHD will often say things like, well, I have to interrupt the conversation because, I need to get it all out. Right. But are you able to like sit and really listen? In reading, right? For not only the ability to read for an extended amount of time, but if you're not attending to what you're reading, your comprehension will suffer, and you're going to miss important parts of a story, important facts in a nonfiction part. And then in writing, right? It's all of the above, plus keeping in mind and focusing on your spelling, your word order, your syntax, your vocabulary usage. Writing, reading, these things take a lot of focus. And if that's weak, it makes it even harder for, to work on all the other language processes. And then similarly, self-monitoring, the ability to sort of think about what you're saying, what you're reading, and making sure that you're understanding, in speaking. Want to make sure that your conversational partner is paying attention and hasn't lost interest, that you aren't going for hours and hours without asking a question about somebody else, right? And then also be the ability to kind of adjust your communication style to meet the partner. Or is there a breakdown? Is somebody not understanding something, and your ability to kind of figure that out and then repair the conversation. In reading, doing check-ins and making sure you're understanding like the bigger picture. But also at the smaller level, did you read that word correctly? Is that a new vocabulary word you've never heard before? Or is it a vocabulary word in a different context? All of that requires your ability to monitor while you're reading. And in writing, again, all of the above, plus, are your ideas on topic? Are they flowing? Are your sentences grammatically correct? Do you have your periods and your kind of writing mechanics, in addition to kind of, which leads us to the next part, is the organization. And a lot of times we think about organization in terms of, are we keeping our materials neat? You'll see kids who have backpacks that are messy, or their desks that can't find anything. And I think Anna spoke to that a little bit. But it also impacts your ability to express yourself. Can you tell a story that gives your readers enough, or your listeners enough background information? Or like some of our kids, are you starting in the middle? And then your partner is like, whoa, wait, like you gotta backtrack a little bit and really help me understand. I would say in my practice, where organization is really is important, is for writing. There are, writing structures, whether it be narrative, or there are certain text structures that go with nonfiction text. And if kids have a weak organizational strategy or system, it's hard for them to write within those confines in a way that kind of our readers expect. And it's something that happens naturally for a lot of us. So we probably don't even realize, oh, this is a compare and contrast paragraph. So, I'm noticing all these like comparative words. But for a kid who struggles with organization, don't have any of that. And it makes it really hard to sometimes understand what they're writing. And then again, the working memory piece, right? Holding all of that information in your memory while processing new information or completing a task. Anna talked about it in terms of a task, but if you think about it even in terms of being a good conversational partner, right? Holding on to your thoughts until somebody has finished their turn. When you're reading, holding information about, if you're reading fiction about a character, and then making inferences based on new information that you've learned. The ability to really comprehend text requires you to kind of keep information in working memory. And then again, in writing, right? It's like, again, all of the above and plus. You have to keep in mind your audience. You have to keep in mind, are your ideas organized? And then even at the sentence level, am I using the proper tense? Am I, are all of my, my capitalization, my period, am I making periods? Am I using commas correctly? Is the word choice the correct choice? And sort of all of that comes together, which again is why writing in general is so difficult for our kids with executive functioning weaknesses. And, I talked a lot about the school piece of it, right? And there are strategies that can and methods that can be used at school to support that. But what do you do at home to help support your kids with academics and executive functioning? And some of the things that I like to suggest, one are helping to break up longer homework assignments into smaller chunks, and maybe making a homework schedule and prioritizing, what to get done first, or maybe taking the assignments that are really quick, the 5-minute worksheet, and getting all of those done before tackling a larger project. It makes homework, the amount of homework seem less overwhelming. And then using some of the strategies that even Anna from like the paper to help reduce working memory on the forming your letters, that kind of stuff. And then something that I like to do even with my own son is to help with organization and formulation is kind of reviewing the day. We all have smartphones. We take lots of pictures. On days where we've done something super fun, I will sit down and we'll go through the pictures and we'll talk about what we did first, and then what happened next, to help with the sequencing piece, but also to help with just organizing ideas for language. And then we'll talk about, what was our favorite part. So I think, and that has become like just a really fun bonding activity. And then even for things that are bigger, and we'll do this in the office too, is like coming up with a book about your vacation, or talking about things that you've done at camp, but doing it with visuals and using pictures to help keep a lot of that organized, and to practice using language in an organized way. Journals are great. They can be digital in terms of blogs. And when you write a journal, there doesn't have to be a lot of format, just getting your ideas out and practicing getting your ideas out. And then there are lots of fun games that work on sort of deductive reasoning and improving working memory, like headbands or 20 questions. And these are not in the handout, but I'm happy to, anybody who wants a list of the games and the activities, I'm happy to provide that. But a card game like Flux, where the rules are constantly changing, or like Scattergories, where you have to retrieve a lot of words under constraints. Those are all sort of fun ways to kind of address some executive functioning weaknesses in the context of language. And I guess as we segue to Amy, one thing I wanted to say about language is that language is regulating, right? I mean, I talked more about the academics, but we use language to regulate our behavior. We use it to regulate our thoughts and our emotions. And Amy will speak more to this, but when kids are lacking some language, you'll see it sometimes in their behavior, such as outbursts, or the opposite side, kids will shut down. And some of that really has to do with helping kids kind of find their words. And it is one of those areas where, like a lot of times Amy and I will work really closely together to help my kid with language formulation, use language to process some of their feelings and emotions. And with that, I will hand it off to Amy.
Thank you, Jen and Anna. So I would say that the top 3 reasons that parents call me for therapy for their child are because their child is struggling with impulse control, emotional regulation, and flexible thinking. And those are, to me, when I think about executive functioning, those are like the base of executive functioning. If you cannot control your impulses and you can't control your emotions and you're thinking really rigidly, it's going to be really hard for you to organize your backpack. So I think about those, impulse control, emotional regulation, and flexible thinking as sort of the bottom, the basement of our executive functioning pyramid. So impulse control is the ability to resist temptation. And the way that is, first of all, the number one thing that teachers complain about. He just has no impulse control. And a lot of times it's because we're expecting kids to control their impulses way, way more than they should be developmentally. But there are really fun play-based ways to practice impulse control. Freeze dance, putting on music and then turning it off and having your child freeze and not move until the music starts again is first of all, it's just a fun thing to do, especially because it's been so cold and miserable outside, but that's a really fun way to practice impulse control. Old school playground games like red light, green light, Simon Says, really good ways of practicing that starting and stopping of their bodies. Playing Jenga is a really good way. Kerplunk is one that I've recently rediscovered. And kids have suddenly, like, everybody wants to play Kerplunk in my office. I recently bought this game called Tightrope that has these rubber bands that stretch across posts and you have to balance marbles. Amazing way to practice impulse control because you really have to take your time to put down your marble and plan where it's going to go. There's a card game called Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. Really, really fun and ridiculous, and a great way of practicing impulse control. Also previewing what the expectation is, not like in the morning when you're going to pick your kid up in the afternoon, because as Anna talked about and Jen talked about, their working memory might not be great for that length of time to hold on to what the expectation is. But when you pick them up, just giving them a little bit of a preview. Okay, we're going to walk home now. And here's the expectation. The expectation is that you're going to hold my hand when we're crossing the street. And sometimes just reminding your child, even though you've done this a bazillion times and the expectation has not changed, just reminding them of the expectation before you start just plants the seed in their head to be able to move forward and meet your expectation. In terms of emotional regulation, that is the ability to exert some control over your own emotional state. And that doesn't mean being calm all the time, because nobody is calm all the time. We all feel a range of emotions, but being able to express those emotions in a way that is not flinging a chair across the room, for example. Being able to feel angry, feel sad, feel happy, feel excited, feel scared, but also still maintain some control over your behavior in those moments. So the best way to do that is to model it for your kids, to talk about feelings all the time. I put in my handout, quote unquote, name it to tame it. If you can name your emotion, then you have a little bit of control over it. Validating your child's emotions. If they seem to be having a hard time finding the words, you can name them for them. And validate. I see that you are so angry right now. I see that you are so afraid right now. It is so scary that this movie is, is terrifying and you want to pause it. And I see that. Really labeling the feelings and validating them, that they are very real. Putting yourself on the same team. One of my favorite things to say to a kid is, yes, this is making you so angry, and no, you do not want to do it. And I get that. Really labeling that feeling and then saying, and how can I support you? So it's not just okay, but we're going to do this thing. It's really, it's the use of the word and, and how can I support you? We're on the same team. I get it. You don't want to do this. It's miserable. It's horrible. And how can I support you in getting it done? Doing a check-in, as Jen said, we start all of our groups. I start most of my therapy sessions with a check-in. How's your week? How's your day? How's life treating you this way? And if kids, especially in the groups, kids will sometimes not want to use feeling words. So we'll do thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, down. We've gotten very creative about diagonal thumbs. It's all good. And then I'll say, do you want to share anything about that? And as they get more comfortable, then they do want to share more about how they are feeling about their week. Doing something physical. I've used balloons a lot in sessions recently. There is something about just batting a balloon back and forth in my office or in the gym that is very regulating for kids. And it puts you on the same team. You can see how many times you can keep it without letting it fall down to the ground. Something else that I like to advise parents is to start a rage practice where every day, and it does not have to be, in fact, don't have it be when you are at your angriest, but in the moment, like just, from 4 until 4:05, we are going to rage, and we're going to take the cushions off of the couch and we are going to pound them, or we are going to, jump on the bed, or we are going to stomp around the block as hard as we can for 5 minutes, or we're going to go outside to the park and scream at the top of our lungs. Because a lot of times kids don't know what to do when they feel angry. So they do the first thing that comes to mind, the first thing that their impulses tell them to do, which is often push somebody or hit somebody. Showing them what to do when they're not completely enraged, when you're not completely enraged, is a good practice. And it allows kids the chance to try something out. Does it feel good to bang on the couch cushions? Does it feel good to scream at the top of my lungs in a place that's safe to do that? Change of scenery. Changing the scenery often, when you're in the middle of a fight, being able to just walk out, like say, let's just take a walk. Let's not talk about anything else. And it can feel a little rewarding. Like, he just yelled at me and I'm saying, let's take a walk. And is that rewarding? But it isn't, because in the moment when your kid is enraged and out of control, they're not learning anything. So taking a break, going for a bike ride, batting a balloon back and forth, taking a walk around the block or to the store to get a juice is not rewarding. It's just changing the scenery and allowing you both to regulate. And water. Water is my cure-all for everything. And when I am having a bad day and when I call my husband and I'm enraged and on the verge of tears and freaking out, he will say, Aim, when was the last time you had water? Oh, right. Yeah, I don't know. And taking that long sip of water will bring my temperature way down. And it's true for our kids too. Water is incredibly regulating. Whether it's drinking it, washing their hands, just running water over their hands, splashing water on their faces, incredibly regulating. And the last thing I want to talk about is flexible thinking, which is the ability to look at something in new and different ways. And the way that I like to teach that in sessions is, Jen mentioned the card game Flux. There's also a board game that is a super fun and challenging way to practice flexible thinking. Cooperative games like Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, Ravine, anything that's going to bring different ideas together, and you have to communicate those ideas and figure out what's going to work the best in that moment. Exercises that flexible thinking. playing old familiar games, but making up a new rule. Like in my groups, we'll play Candyland, but we'll each make up one new rule, which just challenges the thinking just a little bit. Creating opportunities. If we stick to the same exact thing all the time, kids never have the opportunity to practice being flexible. So, taking a different route to school by like one block and seeing what you see on that block versus the usual route can be a little disruptive, but also it challenges their flexible thinking in a way that's safe. And being a flexibility role model, saying, oh shoot, I forgot to take the steak out of the freezer for dinner, and now we are not going to have that for dinner, so I have to be flexible. I have to think of a different idea. And really labeling when you are being flexible shows our kids that it's all okay, that it's frustrating, it's disorienting, it can be a little scary, and we can recover and make a new plan. The soccer game gets rained out. It's an opportunity to spend more time together doing something different. So any time that you can use that and label it for your child is good. And asking them, if you need them to be flexible on the way home from school, you need to run an errand before you do the exact same routine that they're used to, saying, hey, I need to use a flexibility pass today. I need to use a flex pass. And you can even make little index cards that say flex pass, say, we're going to do this, and then we're going to get back on track, and the routine will be the same. So with all of that said, I would love to open it up for questions. And there are so few of you, you can really unmute and just ask your question. Chris?
Hello.
Hello.
I have a 6-year-old who's diagnosed as 2E, sort of high functioning, like super smart, very strong-willed. And I'm trying to figure out ways, all of the things you're talking about. She's very good with like verbal knowledge in that sense, but the self-control and her sort of dominance to get what she wants is like off the charts, like to the point where, she will scream or cry about something, or not really cry, but just sort of whine about something. She's only 6, until she gets it, television, something bad for her, candy, something like that. And she'll hold out for a long time. So things that are sort of like, how do I undo some of the bad kind of patterns that I've obviously kind of allowed? Television, staying up late, not doing things scheduled. Like we've found that like meals right now have gotten harder and harder, and she's sort of stretching them out longer and longer, leaving the table and coming back, so it takes forever. But at the same time, I wanted to eat food, so it's sort of this kind of, I don't know what you would call it, catch-22. But if you have any advice for like how to kind of pull someone back into a more regulated, sort of system, or get them to appreciate why things are not allowed. A long question.
And Anna and Jen, jump in. My first thought when you started speaking is you did what you needed to do to survive. So let's, it's very easy to say, oh, we've allowed this to happen and we've said yes way too much and now it's out of control. But also you need to live. And if having a little extra TV time or throwing in a piece of candy as a treat makes things a little bit easier to get through the day, that's actually okay. There is no hard and fast thing. what my biggest thing, or my biggest piece of advice would be to choose one small thing that you're going to change, whether that's, we're going to turn off the TV at 8 o'clock, or we're going to, we're going to watch TV only from this time to that time, or it's a half-hour show, whatever it is that you decide to tackle, or dinner is going to last for 30 minutes. And, if you're up, if you miss it, then you miss it. But
so kind of preemptively making those kind of like, this is going to happen.
Yes. One small thing, and then letting your child, I happen to know her, so letting her know that this is coming, and how can you support her? Letting her know that that it's going to be so hard, and how can you support her? How can you be on the same team together, to make sure it happens? What would help her sit at the table? What would help her remember to turn off the TV? And about treats, I mean, my feeling is that letting kids have a certain number of treats a day, whether it's one, or I once met a family that was like, I can't even deal with one treat a day. One a week is already more than I can bear. But deciding how many treats for a day, and then giving the child control over when they happen, so that there's a little bit of that, they feel like they have a little bit of a say, that can also help. But when a kid starts with the whining and the complaining, and it's too hard and it's awful, and then you just move into soothing. And it's so hard, it stinks that this is the rule, it's awful, I get it, it's terrible, it, really validating that feeling, because it's real, it does suck, and it's the rule. And you can support her, whether that's a little extra water, or, do you want to go for a walk to get your mind off of that, or, something like that. Jen, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, and I was going to say also, in terms of explaining a rule, less is more. The less language you use about something that's going to probably be emotionally charged, I think the better off you'll be. And then when things go well, a lot of praise. Also in the same little amount. Wow, that was really hard and you did it. And let them sit with that a little bit. But yeah, definitely less words are always better when you're dealing with, something that may cause a behavioral reaction.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to suggest a few things. I don't know what she's running off to in the middle of dinner, but maybe making mealtime more engaging and more exciting, maybe engaging in a word game. How many letters of the alphabet can we go through naming animals, alligator, bear, okay, now your turn. And also maybe using a visual timer for mealtime, like time for a 6-year-old is so abstract, maybe just set it for 15 minutes. Okay, let's sit here for 15 minutes, see if we can finish our dinner. And then when we leave the table that you're telling me you don't want to eat anymore, we're all done. So see if you can like slowly expand that. Just something.
If you don't have one, the time timer is one of the best purchases ever. There's an app, I think, that you can, so it can be on your phone or on the iPad, but also it's just you can buy it in all different sizes, and it's a visual timer. So it's, it's red for how much time, and then it slowly gets smaller and smaller, but it's a constant reminder of visually.
App?
It's an app, or you can buy a physical clock. It's called the time timer. Oh, Jen is going to show you one because she happens to be at the office. Yeah, I have the 12-inch size in my office, which is a commitment, but this is a reasonable size.
That looks great.
The smaller one is also really good for older kids, but yeah, this is great.
Awesome.
I'll jump in with a question, and I'm I am jumping worlds because I have a 4-year-old with executive and a 9-year-old that I've just learned has executive functioning challenges. So I'm trying to think, and they're very different kids. For the 9-year-old, everything you were sharing about writing, like the academic pieces, are resonating with me. Is it ever too late to work on handwriting? Like, have we reached so 4th grader, halfway through 4th grade? Do you think it's worth practicing handwriting at this point, or are we just like gonna be moving on to computers? Like, I'm just curious about that, because like it was an issue kindergarten and COVID, right? So like there just was the foundation was missed, and now it's been a real problem. So I was just wondering, because it was coming up through both of your spiels there.
Rika, nice to meet you. I'm
Nice
gonna
to meet you.
say no, it's not too late. I think like towards the end of middle school and definitely in high school, then we start to encourage typing. But a 9-year-old can definitely work on handwriting. I wasn't sure if you were talking about like the physical component or more of the formulating ideas, but I can speak to the physical component.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, if your child is willing to practice handwriting, like I recommend, like I give my students homework. So like practicing for 10 minutes a day, using the strategies. If they're willing to use the strategies, then yeah. I don't know if your child has another diagnosis, but if a child is really, really struggling to just form letters and maybe they have autism and they've been trying to learn how to write their name and they're 9, then I would recommend handwriting. But for someone who's, able to write sentences and is less cognitively struggling in a if they're in a general education setting, that sort of thing, then yeah, handwriting is something I would work on for a 9-year-old.
Okay. Got my work cut out for me. All right. And I think maybe then for just more of the complexities of writing, right? And which we are learning to be, I think, an ongoing challenge. We don't have an IEP yet, right? He's in gen ed, he's in an ICT class, so there's extra support. But I think I was just wondering, is there anything or any programs they've got, new learning to write with the new curriculum happening in the school, and he's at a school that's like a front runner there. So I think they're getting more direct instruction around writing, but is there anything else aside from hiring you that might be helpful?
I think that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Because it depends on the kid, but there's also so many different types of writing. And
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of, if they're doing it at school, if you are on the track to the IEP piece, to kind of maybe let that go at home. And, maybe, or at the very least, maybe look it over, and kind of maybe share it with him, or have him share what he's doing and that piece, because a lot of the programs are really instructional and they're structured and you have to follow a sequence, and I think that might be a little too much to do at home.
Battleground.
For you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but what I do like, and it has to do with getting your ideas out, is actually drawing. I don't know if they like art but drawing your day, or doing like comic strips or something like that. So you're still working on the same like retrieval and working memory, and then, hand strength and the handwriting piece, but you're taking out some of the verbal and the organization piece, but just practicing getting your ideas out. Which is what writing is, right? It's just the visual representation of your ideas. And usually kids, and I'm taking a guess here, but like even prioritizing their information for writing. What is the most important? What goes first? What do I need to talk about? What's my main topic? And you can actually address that through drawing. what was the best part of your day? What did you do? What did you mostly do today? And that might be a little bit of a home friendlier way to kind of address that, because writing is a struggle and writing is frustrating. And if you have both formulation, organization, and some handwriting weaknesses, I mean, I can't imagine that that's going to be fun for either of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll come back to another question. I want to open it up to others if we have time.
Sounds like we have time.
Okay, so for the 4-year-old, he can name when he's angry, but he never names any other emotions. Is that okay? How do you bring about? So yeah, we've gotten really good at that one, which is great. But I'm like, okay, well, just trying to insert kind of recognition of other emotions has been harder, but maybe that's less important, and getting kind of the frustration out there and being able to name it is most important. What's your thoughts on the other emotions? Should they name when they're happy or thinking things are funny or whatever? How important is that? Or is it more just on the higher end of the spectrum that we should be focusing?
Say at 4, kids can usually identify happy, sad, mad, and scared. Those are the 4 that I kind of look for. 4-year-olds hate acknowledging when they're scared, and sad sometimes too can be really hard. So a lot of times anger becomes everything, as opposed to being able to kind of pick out what exactly they're feeling. And happy, like, we all know when we're happy, but we don't walk around going, I'm so happy right now.
Right.
Like, it's just awkward. So I think you kind of modeling it like, wow, that was really funny. I'm having a lot of fun today. Or this was a really, what made me so happy today is coming home and seeing you, or, like whatever, like, labeling happiness when you feel it. And then helping him if you can. And if he can't, it's totally fine. It's not the end of the world, but picking apart, like, it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be scared. And you acknowledging when you're feeling those things is always a good first step. And then he might be a little bit more willing to acknowledge. But they feel a similar when you're 4. It feels like one big, it's like happy and unhappy. There's not,
right.
It can be hard to really differentiate between those 3. And it can be hard for them to admit that because they just feel like they're so tough and nothing scares them, or nothing makes them sad. So just, allowing those feelings, having an open door for them, and when you feel them, naming them, and if you notice that he's feeling them, naming them. And if he's like, no, that's not, totally fine. Totally fine.
No, that's helpful. Thanks.
Kate, do you have something to?
Hi.
Hello.
So I have a 13-year-old, and we had a conversation last night, because sometimes he gets really fixated on something, and sometimes it is something online that it's a project and he wants to complete that project. And we had this conversation last night because I've been getting emails from the teachers about homework, and I had gotten this email. So, part of it is like just wanting to connect with him and being like, okay, you've been spending a lot of time on screens. It's a lot of screen time. And part of it is like, how do I then, we haven't really had the time to connect. How do I then like broach this subject when I know that like there's gonna be some conflict, because he doesn't want to do the homework. And I wouldn't want to do it either. And okay, so the conversation we had was like, I was trying to say and instead of but, and I was bringing it up. He's I'm not like, I just want him to know that the marking period is coming to an end and that he has been a little more focused on achievement this year. I don't think he's going to fail anything, but I just want him to know that like that's, you know, that's coming up and that they're telling me about it. And then he says to me, well, how do you feel when you're working on a project and it's really important to you and someone just cuts you off and says you can't do that anymore? So I'm like, that would really upset me. I would really be unhappy about that, and it would feel unfair, and I wouldn't want to do it. Now, I've had a little time to think about this, and like my executive function is strong enough to know when I need to eat, sleep, when I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do something else. So what can I do? What can we talk about tonight that might help with getting him to like at least try some Spanish homework? I don't know.
Yeah. First of all, kudos to opening the door to the conversation and him not totally shutting it down and throwing a pillow at your head. So
This was after an entire weekend of letting him have a lot of extra screen time.
Yeah.
Because he was building a level. He was doing something creative. So I always feel like that's a little different.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that screens, like, we can say they're awful and they're bad, but they meet a need for our kids, whatever that need is. It's important to them. And he's saying, how would you feel if somebody told you that something that was really important to you actually isn't, and that Spanish, which I'm never going to use, is important. And I mean, it's just such a great way of thinking about that question. So I think that there's a lot of space to go back and say, okay, so, how much time, because it does require a lot of time to build these worlds. And how much time does his Spanish homework take? And how much time does, so thinking about time in that way, sometimes I'll have families make index cards of all of the things that either need to get done, like dinner or homework, and you can even break up homework even more. So Spanish, math, whatever the homework is, and things that he wants to get done, like world building or video game build, or whatever he's doing, and arranging those. And how much time do you think each one is going to take? How much time do you want to spend on each one? But this is the amount of time we have, right? You have from 3 until 8, or you have from 3, whatever the hours are. And how do you want to organize that time, knowing that this is what needs to get done? Like that you're going to need to eat dinner. You're going to need to, you want to have time to play this video game. You've got to get this Spanish homework done. How do you want to organize this? And how can I support you in organizing it?
How can I support you?
Can I jump in? I actually have to run because I have a session, but kind of piggybacking on what Amy said and using the time timer, there's an executive functioning like guru who often suggests if you take like the time timer and color code the amount of time that you have for everything. So if he's going to decide how much time he wants to spend or have some say in that, just kind of like making a pie chart in different colors, basically, on like a regular, on a clock. And that could help kind of keep, maybe help with the process. So he can, and now there's a visual representation of it also. And with that, I have to run. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Jen.
Have a good one.
See you later.
Bye.
Does that help, Kate?
It does. I don't know if the color coding timer would help because it changes so much each day, but and we've tried, it definitely helps. And we've done things like Post-its, and it'll work really well for a day, and I'll be like, hey, that worked great.
Does he
And
think
he'll
it
be like,
worked
I
great?
hate that. We're never doing it again. I don't need it. You know, he always says that.
Right.
He
Yeah.
says, I don't need that. And it's so funny because he didn't have OT for like half the year just because they didn't have it at the school. And then he got it at OT, and now it conflicts with Spanish. And he's like, I need OT, so they shouldn't be making me do the Spanish. So suddenly he needs it. I mean, he does need it, but it's just interesting
Yes.
that, you know, I really want him at this point to start understanding what he does and doesn't need, because I want him to be involved in his own self-advocacy.
Yeah.
When kids say that, like, I don't need that, like, how do you approach that?
I think saying, okay, so that wasn't helpful for you. It worked for me. You didn't like it so much. So we'll keep looking. We'll keep trying to figure something out.
Okay. But as far as like a broad category of therapy or like a IEP section of the IEP or something, like
where would this go? Where
like
would
him
this,
saying, I don't need that.
he doesn't need,
Like he said he didn't need counseling. So we actually removed counseling from his IEP, but like, are we just going to keep going with suddenly he has nothing? Or when I think he needs it, things like OT or whatever.
yeah, I mean, I think we have to think about what he finds helpful.
Mhm.
And sometimes, you know, it gets to the point where the school services really aren't so helpful. And
Yeah,
they
that's
are, you are missing things that are, you know, so like in a perfect world, you know, with a great therapist, yes, he would need that and he would want it and he would find it helpful. And for some kids, you know, then you get to a certain point and it's like, but I'm missing class. I mean, that's what happens with a lot of my middle schoolers is
right.
that they're like, I don't want to be pulled out of class anymore. It sets me apart. I'm missing important information. I'm really into what we're learning in history and I don't want to miss that. So they're not supposed to pull them out of anything important, but it's all important at this age, right? Like gym is important. There, you know, science is important. Art is important. Music is important. All of that is important. So
That's what I was trying to explain, is like it exercises different parts of your brain. And that like that brain development piece is what we're really focused on, not whether you can have a conversation in Spanish.
yeah,
Although falling further behind in things seems to create more anxiety, then there's less desire to do it, and then falling further behind because there's no practice, etc.
I wonder if a good way of thinking about it for him would be the same way he thinks about games, like creating the levels.
Yeah, my hope is that just he gets into Duolingo.
Yeah.
That's my dream.
Yeah. Yeah, but thinking about, you know, you've got these levels and, you know, we want to make sure that they all get exercised. Just like you want to keep building this video game, we want to build all of these layers of your brain. And it's important, especially if he wants to do well. It sounds like he's
Yeah, this
like
year
for
he's
the first time he
motivated.
cares. Yeah, about grades or whatever. So
Yeah, since like second grade. It's the first
yeah,
time he cares. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Don't want to take all your time. Thanks.
Yes. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I had one sort of follow-up question about like emotional regulation, particularly in relation to sibling fights. My 6-year-old tends to attack her sister. She apparently doesn't behave like this at school. You know, she always says like, I can't control it. It's just like a reflex. And I'm trying to think of like, and then it sort of spirals because then her sister feels like she's the right to defend herself, obviously, and I'm sort of caught in the middle of like two very opposing battle strategies. And I'm getting the sense that like if I can do something to kind of create a kind of pause or between me, that would help. But like, do you have any strategies for like, how do you, if something happens, how do you kind of lower the temperature, I guess, or like not kind of shame them for maybe something that was a reflexive action? I don't know what I'm saying. How do I stop fighting?
I mean, siblings fight, and that's part of where they learn how to stick up for themselves, how to have a fight and then be playing together again a few minutes later, how to forgive and forget and move on. It's an important part of life, is how to navigate that dynamic. And I think that the most important thing is just making sure that, like separating and then making sure that everybody feels calm and heard. And then how do they want to make it right with each other? So less about punishments, although I think that that's what the older one would feel good about, some kind of revenge.
Yeah. You've heard that.
But how do they want to apologize to each other? Do they want to draw a picture for each other? Do they want to how do they want to repair the relationship? Some kids will do like community service, like, I'm going to do something kind for this person. I'm going to do their chore tonight, to make up for, but it should come from the kids. How do you want to repair this? Like, we've had a fight, this is what happens, and how do you want to make it better for each other? Because punishments don't, that's not going to stop anybody from being impulsive in the future. It's just not. Yeah. So it's more about, okay, I did this thing, I hurt somebody, and how do I, thank you, Rika. And how do I make it right with this person?
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Easier said than done.
But creating kind of systems or tools for doing that is the first step. Like, that's sort of what I'm gleaning.
Yeah. I think, modeling a world where we're all human beings, that nobody is perfect, that we make mistakes, and when we've made a mistake, how do we make it right? It's hard. It's hard to apologize.
Yeah, it's not just 6-year-olds that have that problem.
No.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. Next month, we are doing, Anna, you don't know this yet. Surprise. But February 26th, it'll be another Monday. We are doing another webinar at noon about transitions. And you will get the invitation for that as well. So hopefully we will see you then. And if you should get an email of the handouts if you haven't already. We will make sure that happens.
That would be great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being engaged and asking great questions. And we hope you can take a few things home with you and use some strategies with your kids.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.